our exclusive interview with President and Chief Commander of the People's Patriotic Party, Zvaringeni Samuel Chasi. Good afternoon, sir.
Afternoon.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. At this stage, how would you rate the popularity of the People's Patriotic Party?
Basically, when you ask the rating of the People's Patriotic Party, the ideology behind the party, most Zimbabweans will ask, do we have structures? Do we have a strong following? Do we have a constitution? Are we stakeholders with the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission? How genuine are we? How authentic are we? So the question is, these we have. We are a registered political organization. Though you must bear in mind the concept of registration of parties in Zimbabwe is redundant, but it's a notification to the Electoral Commission. So when we rate ourselves as a political organization, it's completely out of the question. But what is in question is how do we rate ourselves in terms of a revolution ahead of the 2023 polls in Zimbabwe. So in this in mind, we look at the drawing board of the comrades, the guerrillas, the likes of Zapu and Zanu, who had the patriotic fronts, Zanda and Zipra respectively, which gave a quagmire to the Smith regime. In this case, we look at toddlers who became widows. We look at the 12-year-olds who were taught how to use the gun and so forth. The spirit which was there. Remember the efforts of the first, second, third Chimrenga, how the attempts were failed. So this was a revolution of the independence of African states. But now, how do we rate our organization? We only rate it with a revolution to a federation of African states, looking and introspecting to the fact that the spirit which brought democracy with the common enemy being the white regime all over Africa is now being replaced by the revoluter being now the oppressor, and the ideology of a federation of African states lost. So when you ask me how do you rate the People's Patriotic Party, we are a radical political organization which is looking forward to a revolution, not only in Zimbabwe as the fruit of Africa, but to liberate the whole of Africa. We are looking at saying we need change, we need a charismatic leadership, we need the spirit which made our forefathers be able to be united, to be able to follow the pillars of strength, to guide them in the darkness, for them to see the light. The spirit which made that young generation to say, this is what we want. So to rate the party, it's not about the party, but it's about the ideology behind it, to say, are we able to do it?
Okay. What level of engagement have you reached with the citizens of Zimbabwe, and what are you hearing from them with regard to what they're expecting in 2023?
More important than speaking is listening to the masses, the citizens. Power is derived from the people. The voice of the people is the voice of God. So when we look that basically Zimbabweans are being taken as stooges, where we only consider about them ahead of the polls. It has become habitual that when we are shy of an election, that's when we want to sponsor surrogate forces to go down on the ground. They are deployed with sugar, all state machinery, and so forth, and even donors coming in different forms as the wolves in sheep clothing, and this being what we don't expect. So basically, from the masses, they are tired. They are tired of the story. Today it's always ZANU-PF, MDC, Triple C. What is going on? So the people are really concerned. Are we being represented in parliament? Why are parliamentarians being silent about electoral reforms? Why are they not taking any stance in a democratic form? Why are they being quiet at this stage? And now we are just going to polls again. Are we going to defeat this Goliath? We should remember the people have got a hope. They've been filled with a rejuvenating spirit to say that we can do something this year. But who's going to lead us to the promised land as it is?
Now that's what I call a voice for the voiceless. What can we expect in politics in the year and economic wise?
Basically, this has been theatrical and deception, which has been filled into the hearts of the people to believe that there can be a revolution in Zimbabwe, there can be a change. Definitely, when we look all into it, the revolution was brought by the barrel of the gun, not by the barrel of the pen. So overnight, we cannot expect to remove this system, this Goliath, this monster called ZANU-PF into the year 2023. It means that we must reorg, we must shape up. So looking ahead into this year 2023, we are looking where in every search for a hero, there must be a villain. We've got one common enemy. This is not the time for another opposition party to fight against another opposition party. But this is the time, not basically for dialogue, but even not for coalition or an alliance, but this is the time to put our heads together and have one common belief engraved on the tablets of our hearts to say, how do we remove this oppressive system? Just the same way the likes of the incumbent president of the ZANU-PF and the East leadership, how they grouped up together, forming a government which had people less than 40 years. There was no cabinet minister who was above that age, basically. Most of them, even the commanders for these satellite camps and so forth, they were between the ages of 19 to 25. But my question still comes, how are we going to come and be together? How are we going to fulfill the destiny of Zimbabwe? Are we going to continue like this, or are we going to look elsewhere? So politically, we're looking at dramas where people, instead of focusing on the electoral reforms ahead of the elections, they now want to become accomplices. And we know that a system which elects corrupt leaders, these are not victims but accomplices. So as People's Patriotic Party, we cannot be accomplices to plunge into an election where we know these things have not been done properly. A diagnosis and a treatment must be given, it must be prescribed, basically, to say that politically we need to put our heads together, even with our small differences and big differences, whatever it may be. This is for the interest of the citizens, for Zimbabweans, for international community, for our own lives, for our own sake. And despite economically knowing that there is hyperinflation, we've been robbed of our finances, rule of law, there is nothing. So economically, we all know that the state only releases funds ahead of the elections. Civil servants throughout the process, they have nothing, they are suffering. They are hitchhiking to work. You know, the ordinary doctor foots about 10 miles to get to work. They don't have electricity for studying and performing operations. In some cases, it's even by candles and torchlights to at least honor the Hippocratic oath to save a life, whatever the case may be.
Out of curiosity from my side personally, do you think the elections will be free and fair?
The issue of elections which are free and fair is out of the question, because how do we say in a country without rule of law, where a constitution which cost the nation the taxpayers' money, and we were looking into this issue, and we look into that. And now, if we look at the Constitution of 2013, and now we're in 2023, and the statutory instruments have been passed on through the bedroom chambers of these ministers, and even our parliament, which is the mute on it, Senate, and so forth, the laws have been changed. We are in a scenario of 2008 where even there was no rule of law and there was nothing, and the violence is being posed. It's now we are in a circus. This is even worse than Animal Farm. So when you are asking me, are the elections of 2023 in Zimbabwe going to be free and fair? So where one individual, one party, using the state resources and machinery, they have diverted the attention of the people and the international community for us to dance to their tune just overnight, and we expect these elections to be fair, free and fair. How can an election be free and fair when it's one party having the case of what a vice president in Zimbabwe, and his daughter, that's Kemba Moati from ZANU-PF, his daughter is in the Electoral Commission. We have the resigned Electoral Commission officers. We don't even know if they are retired. They are now participating in the ZANU-PF elections. We've got the junta, which is victimizing people down on the roots, and they are being strategically contained and maintained, and we don't have electoral reforms being derived from the people through a referendum. So how can we say the elections are going to be free and fair when the opposition is moving in with one leg missing there?
Okay, so with all these facts put out there, please tell us, have there been any electoral reforms so far?
What electoral reforms? Under my foot. So when we look into these things, when we talk about electoral reforms in Zimbabwe, this is chasing a fart in the wind. I have emphasized on different occasions, even going back 6 months backwards, we looked at what electoral reforms are being needed in Zimbabwe. One, Zimbabwe needs to be independent. It needs to resolve its own problems. Power is derived from the people, the masses. So what Zimbabwe needs right now is to work on a consultative process where we look at a referendum and to pass the laws like what is really needed, because these people, they see us as lifeless objects, just disguised as voting statistic. It's not working. It's not working. We've tried it several times. So, and the worst thing is there are cases where we look at ourselves being preempted by false journalists and so forth, who are on a mission to find out who is really a genuine opposition and who is not. So when you look at those kind of things and these state agents who are investigating in the background and so forth, when you look at electoral reforms, what we really need as Zimbabweans right now to propel forward, we need to aim to higher levels as the year approaches, and as with the little time remaining there. What we need in order not to cry foul or even treasury and so forth, and in terms of rigging, what Zimbabwe needs is not harmonized elections to the international world and our SADC states. This is time for Zimbabwe to have separate elections. We need separate presidential elections. This will bring less violence, and this also helps the opposition parties and the ruling party, those with parliamentarians, so that they will campaign separately and the council. This is in the interest of Zimbabweans, because once it's one winner takes all and grabs all, we have got a parliament which is sleeping. They are just going to have coffee, tea, and sleep in these hotels with their side chicks and so forth. And we cannot sponsor such a system where we've got a senate of people with the who are just coming to put on a show there, You know, how can we keep on voting old people, 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds? You know, we've got the presidential candidates. I'm sure that out there in the world, including myself, the Constitution prohibits anyone below the age of 40 to participate in a presidential election. So when we look into all those things, and someone who is a youth, basically, who is 18 years old or 21 years old, who aspires to be a councillor or an MP, but is now being hindered by the fact of you need $1,000 to participate in nomination court. You need to be 40 years and above to participate in presidential. There is nothing which prohibits this system from even augmenting the age level from 40 to 50 for a presidential candidate. And they expect us to go and vote for them. They expect to use us like tissue. They have no respect for us. So when you look at electoral reforms, there are definitely no electoral reforms in Zimbabwe. And this is undemocratic. This is unconstitutional. And it's of grave concern to look at our friendly forces within opposition there who are sitting mum on this, and they, instead of speaking about electoral reforms and being the bone of contention and being put on the table there in Parliament and Senate, these things are being kept quiet about. So what we need right now is Zimbabwe to prepare for elections, but to know that the elections have to proceed forward anyway. This is a clarion call to say the legal that we can do is to revise these electoral reforms by a referendum. We have a litmus test on the voters' roll, and also it promotes peace as well. So any electoral reform which has nothing to do with the people is barbaric on its own. So this is out.
The elaboration for me is cherry on top of the cake. Based on that answer, what's your analysis as opposition on the delimitation report and voters' roll? So
basically, when I look at the delimitation report and voters' roll, I'm looking this as the voters' roll interpretation. The opposition is not prepared to understand. Henceforth, we gregariously promoted to have an ideology where I learned my idol and mentor being the Black Russian, the late Dumiso Davenga, in who personally I would say that in the mind which he thought and everything, if he was alive, what was he going to do? If Lookout Masuku today was there, how were they going to tackle this? How will they understand what is a delimitation report? This is the atrocity, the path where we are at the fulcrum and we don't understand what's next or what's going on. So if you look at the delimitation, it was on the boundaries. In 2018, we had 10,895 polling stations. From these polling stations, we look basically if 200 people vote from each polling station, this helps the ZANU-PF regime or any other party, in this case, to be able to attain between 2 million to 6 million. So that's based on the concept of between 200 to 500. So basically we now know that, okay, this place, we've got 500 votes from this polling station. So in a case like this, where the voters' roll is not being accessible, there's nothing which prohibits ZANU-PF from busing people from one polling station to another. They just easily demarcate the boundary. Let's say in the case where in Cranbourne there, then there are military camps there. ZANU-PF is able to campaign within the state institutions, but opposition cannot go to the state institution and start campaigning within there. So strategically, the delimitation report, it's just isolated the opposition to be an island within their own. And now the main camp being within that area where now all the ZANU-PF forces, they know from each polling station, they already have 500 votes. So they are focusing on a strategy there. Then, even for example, you take another random dossier, we place it, let's say it's Makokova constituency there, right? Then we look at there's Rose camp, there's a police camp, right? This is what they've been split between 1, 7, 8, and so forth, right?
Yes.
Right. So tell me, how does one enter into a police camp, civilian, and promote democracy? This is where the constitution comes into play, saying that they are not allowed to be in active politics. But we know that there's a polling station which they have, which is close to them. So ZANU-PF, with the power of the incumbent, they're able to basically maintain this, and they've got the voters' roll. So it's easier to maintain this power using a force, right? This is undemocratic on its own. So when we are looking, yes, the delimitation report and the voters' roll, these are powerful tools to ZANU-PF when maintaining power, but we also look into the fact that democratically, any party in a democratic first world country, when you have a manifesto and so forth, you are able to convince to the people, you are able to make contact with them and so forth, to convince them to come on board and to vote for you. But where people are being captured by the state, it becomes in vain. Our efforts are being thwarted. So the issue of the delimitation report goes back again to the people, to the citizens, to the opposition. When we say, let's put our heads and work together, and we understand one party has got certain skill and the other has got certain skill. We are a body which makes, with different units, which makes one part there. So we want to come into play and say, gentlemen and ladies, let us look what are the best interests for the country, what's best. So if you are clueless and you want to just go and talk, the train keeps on moving, and you expect to come and say, let's go to the constitutional court, our election has been rigged. But in other words, one man's poison is another man's meat.
Okay. Has the voter registration been a success? How credible is the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission?
Well, that's a bold question. Has the voter registration exercise been a success? Yes, if 40 million people register to vote, even 5 million, no one has got any claim to them, because at the end of the day, your vote is your secret. So there's no way that I can identify who voted for me using the voter registration exercise. But we look into one issue whereby the voter turnout can be 52% or 80%. At the end of the day, it's about who's going to pitch up on the voting day, and how prepared are we? Are we training our polling agents in advance to know their roles? What are they going to do? What manpower is going to be on the ground? So when we look into these things, this is the game. The Zimbabwe Electoral Commission will never play fair, because basically they are under mandate to be independent and not be non-partisan. But in an autocratic system like Zimbabwe, we see that the electoral officers, they're actually working for ZANU-PF. Their families are deployed by ZANU-PF already. So the question of Electoral Commission being fair and being non-partisan is out of the question, because these are the people who delayed in announcing the results. There is tension which is raised when the election results are delayed, and they're being manipulated and being told what to do, and their tallies are not adding up together. So this is where we need SADC observers and even Electoral Commission there to come up and be independent of these elections. It goes back to the electoral reforms which we have castigated for, to say that they must flow freely among the people.
Please tell us, what are your thoughts on the other opposition parties in Zimbabwe and their chances of bringing change? Are there any hopes for alliance or coalition?
the issue of an alliance and coalition is a waste of time. An alliance in Zimbabwe has proved to be in vain. We look, who is the opposition? The major opposition that we had was founded in 2000. Now we only carry the crumbs of that cream during that time, right? And are looking at where the spirit of the founding father, Morgan Richard Tsvangirai, is gone. MDC has been split more than 10 times. Now there is a fraction coming from it. Triple C is already on a threat to go down. So, who is the opposition in Zimbabwe? Zimbabweans are being given a false hope. We have got stooges, minions, trolls, who expect to lead from the front, who are not organized. This is when we need the people to come together. We don't know who is opposition. We have got innocent people who are behind bars, who are incarcerated currently, who are brave enough with valor to defeat the oppressive system in Zimbabwe. Because at the end of the day, it's not about an opposition party liberating Zimbabwe. We look into the junta government, which came in 2017 there. This was about a revolution for them. Unconstitutionally, they took power from Robert Mugabe. But what they represented the time of the judges. So basically, we are still in a military rule in Zimbabwe because constitutionally we failed to take power. But now when we look into a political organization coming, it's extremely fatal to say we are going to remove this system. It's only when we are radical and our hopes lie on democratic means through electoral reforms. The other passage, are they able to do that?
Good. What kind of backing does People's Patriotic Party have? And are you confident to make an impact during the harmonized elections?
It's not about making an impact in 2023 that matters. What matters is, are we all going to have a slice of the cake? Are we all going to enjoy the sharing? So the issue of us doing political posturing is out of the question. What we need is the masses to be engaged, to be part of this revolution, to come together as one. Just the same way these guerrillas came in on board. They worked together. They knew that politically they will never work together.
Yes.
But they identified the enemy. Once you identify the enemy, you are able now to take aim. You are able to release the shot. You are able to follow through. You are able to hold your breath and to know, I have hit the target. So in this case, the target is not ZANU-PF. ZANU-PF is also an accomplice. It does not make any meaningful contribution to society for opposition to fight against opposition or for opposition to fight against the ruling party. Look into the modern world. The Democrats, the Republicans, the Conservatives, whatever they are doing, the Labour parties, all these people, what they put ahead, they put patriotism ahead. They put the citizens ahead. They know that whatever they're fighting for is in the interest of citizens. So when we look at as an organization, we are guided by our own constitution, which is available on our website and so forth. So when we look into where we want modern day public speaking, where we want to work together, we have public debates and so forth, where we put the interest of citizens ahead more than on our individual side. So we are failing to work together. We are failing to communicate. We are failing to thrust the point home. So the issue will be, are we having the spirit which is going to rise? Is Africa going to rise once more? What is the goal? So the goal at the end of the day will be for Federation of African States. And how does it start? It starts by these other small states being able to form one government there. Not about one-man power, where one loots or one is after minerals and wealth to enrich themselves, but for the interest of the nation, knowing that if we fight the differences, we are doing it for the people, not for our own lives, because power is from the people.
This is the question that most of the people would like to hear about. So, would you be in a position to engage or work with ZANU-PF in any capacity?
This is not an issue about Beauty and the Beast. So when I look at ZANU-PF, it's just a beast. So this is not a fairy tale where I have to kiss them to become a handsome prince. Not any given day will ZANU-PF reform. But we understand where they're coming from because of what they fought for us and tried their best. Along the way, they lost the mindset to understand what the people want. If they'd been bringing in a devolution and they were able to uphold the constitution, the rule of law, and they also managed to accommodate the opinions and views of other opposition parties and basically from the people, even understanding their own constitution. So when I look into ZANU-PF, I was raised and born in it. I was molded in it. So I understand in and out. I've been in their own National Commissariat Department. So engaging with ZANU-PF is really chasing a fart in the wind. I will tell you that. So what we need is to engage with the people. When we engage with the people, we know that the law is being upheld. We know that the people are the power. I would over and over once again make a clarion call to every individual, every citizen, wherever they may be, in the interest of Zimbabwe, to understand that it's not about engaging ZANU-PF or opposition, but it's about engaging the people. We must work together, we must build together, layer upon layer, precept upon precept. We need a strong, firm foundation where we know that this is where our hearts lie. This is where patriotism is engraved on the tablets of our hearts. Where we know this, we are not promoting the West agenda or the East agenda, but it's about the Zimbabweans. So the question of ZANU-PF is out. They failed completely.
Well said. From your perspective, or your angle of view, please tell us or enlighten us, what will be your next step if the status quo is maintained and ZANU-PF continue to hold power?
For me, it's not the next step on what I can do, but it's the current thing which we can do now. This is where we need to put up our heads together. The world has to know the exact position. When we look into the geopolitics currently taking place global and even regional, this is the time where we also look into is civil war the ultimate? Are we interested in being an Islamic State or the Boko Haram, or are we pursuing the agenda just like Russia and Ukraine there? The Ukrainians are not enjoying the battle, even the Russians. But this is a spark which was triggered by the tongue. These are wars and rumors. These basically, I would say, signs of the last days. So when I come back to that, my question will be, if what we can do is to stand together as one people. There's no need to call a state of emergency, postpone elections, or even to think outside the box in other avenues and so forth. What we need now is to say the path is straight and narrow. It has been always been a norm to know that the people, they take the truth to be heard. When you know that I've lost the elections, this is my alternative, and you can't even pull a catapult and you expect to say we remove ZANU-PF this way. The answer lies in the electoral reforms. That's the answer. That's our national treasure, to say if we can come up together as one united in thought, word, and action, and understand that this generation will never die, but it will save Zimbabwe. The country will never die. Once a man's mind is driven by new ideas, it never regains its original dimensions. So what we need within our sphere of influence and circumference to understand that we need to have a status quo where we know that there's inclusivity in what we are doing, where we know that we are being genuine. We are not doing stomach politics where we are seeking for etc. things, funding and other things which don't bring a revolution. At the end of the day, it's about power being derived from the people. So we need to engage with the people.
As much as I am actually enjoying this, we are almost done. But nevertheless, as a party, what are your biggest hurdles and challenges in the build-up to elections in 2023?
Some of the biggest hurdles that we have faced, they are not in actuality being hurdles at all. We look in a race. In a race, you don't turn back if you are doing the hurdles jump. You have to face it. You have to sprint. You don't have to hit it hard. It's about being able to maintain time. The speed of light is equal to the speed of darkness. So if you are not being able to stand up and say that what's best for us in a revolution, what do we need, the resources and so forth. So some of the hurdles that we are going through is when we are promoting democracy, and then the main agenda there is now about who is speaking. When we throw a stone at the enemy, and now the media does not come to promote these things, and they are quiet about it, or they are blocked, or they are bribed, and when another opposition party comes to infiltrate another opposition party, or the ruling party comes to take over these other parties, these hurdles, they come through with the lack of unity and so forth. Now what we need to do is to work together, come together as one. So when we come together as one, we are able to overcome through all these things. So basically, when we look at the hurdles ahead of us, this is the walls of Jericho, where they have to come down with a shout. This is the clarion call to every man and woman, youth out there, to say, this is about what our forefathers stood for, how brave they were. They stood up against the enemy. They stood in resolute together to say that we are one. Even the authors of the Declaration of Independence, they knew what was best for them. But we have learned with sorrow and regret that even as we want to do these things, are the people ready to revolute? Are the people ready to be liberated? What are we going to do? Can we say that once every 5 years a parliamentarian comes in, gives you jiggies, gives you a cup of sugar, a cup of rice, and you want to elect them, and they've not been there? What kind of people are we? What caliber is in us? How long shall we continue being fooled?
Things have happened, things are happening. In brief, what's your message to the international community?
To the international community, we need support emotionally. Why? This is the time to comfort Zimbabwe. Not with funds or interference, but just to take a step back. Zimbabweans are old enough, are of age, to know what they really need. Zimbabweans can't sleep under the bridges or being out in the waters of Zambezi, leapfrogging into South Africa, going to stay in these quarters, becoming nurse aides abroad. Zimbabweans need to fester through this period on their own. Zimbabweans are on a mission. So if Zimbabweans at this stage can also be disavowed for their actions, because we cannot say 50 million people are being tormented by an occultic system of less than 100 people. Look at the negotiations which were done during the coup. It was only a handful of people. It was not the 50 million people. The Zimbabweans were on the streets celebrating and so forth. But it was just a few people. So now when we look into the population of Zimbabweans, wherever they may be, this is the time for them to put a shoulder to the wheel and push along as one. We need to be brave enough. The spirit of unity is needed. We need change. When the people are being in the prisons, people are being abducted. To date, we have Itai Dzamara, never seen again. Kenny Kala was killed. The generals, Mujuru, never resolved. It has become habitual that once in a while, when an opposition or a figure comes up to fight against the system, it becomes a target and bait. So to the international community, this is the time as well to help on electoral reforms in Zimbabwe ahead of the elections, without any postponement to the elections. This is what we need.
From my side, you are the change. You are the voice. It is your constitutional right. Be the change. All in all, thank you so much. We are honored and thankful for having you on our show.